what is the mindset that needs to exist for anyone here to really scale their business and make, take a business maybe doing a few $100,000 and turn it into making millions?
Number one, action. Number two, don't worry about failure. Because I can tell you stories of, I'm probably the biggest failure you've ever met.
Batman credit card story.
So it's just action. Just get out there and do it, and you're going to find out if it works. Very often, direct marketing is very counterintuitive. What you think works doesn't, and what you don't think will work does. So you got to test. You got to test everything. You got to test everything. And with the internet, it's so easy to test. It's so inexpensive.
When do you know you fail? Like, I think we've all been there where we have something that kind of might be. When do you know to cut bait and try some other shit?
Well, you're always testing.
Right.
And if the test comes out and you've really done your job in terms of testing and you see the results aren't there, you shift, you go to some other...
When do you know that you beat a dead horse to death? Sometimes you have a great thing, you don't quit after your first test.
Well, I always tell people never to fall in love with their own ego, in other words, with their own product. Because very often people will take chances selling their product, not giving up when they should have given up long ago. So that's good advice for not losing money. But I owe my success to just action, trying as many different approaches. Just never never giving up, of course. So, the thing is, I equate success with like a bucket of oysters, and in that bucket is an oyster with a pearl. And you open up that first oyster, and it's tough on your fingers, and you cut yourself, and you open up the second oyster, and then pretty soon, by the time you're down to the fourth or fifth oyster, you're saying, I don't think this is worth it, and you give up. Well, there's still that pearl in that bucket, and the people that don't give up will find that pearl, and they'll be successful. So, I hope. Does that help?
No, yeah. Well, it's a balance thing too, because I mean, I'm done from puberty. What? What's with this big guy on talking shit? Do we have to rub you down with olive oil again?
I wish you would.
Well, it's a fine line between the best way to get out of a hole is to quit digging. Like when do you actually know you just need to cut bait? And I mean, I just tend to look at what's the opportunity cost of if you were to continue versus something else. But every entrepreneur, do you know the stats of how many people are entrepreneurs in America compared to the population? Does anyone know the stat? 1 in 400. Okay, so, and 94% of all entrepreneurs, according to Kauffman Foundation, never make more than $50,000 in their entire career, a year. So you're talking shitloads of failure, lots of, very few people relative to the entire population. And so to even do it, to even be an entrepreneur, takes the ability to take risks. And most people aren't mentally willing and capable of taking those risks. And so, there's this documentary I watched called Call of the Entrepreneur, and they interviewed this Chinese guy that escaped from communist China, and he built this very successful multi-million-dollar business. And they asked him, they're like, how would you define an entrepreneur? And he said, it's just diving into hope. It's like diving into hope, and that's what I really love about entrepreneurs is they just try shit. But those of you in the advertising business, David Ogilvy, if you've never read Ogilvy on Advertising, read it. It's like one of those books you just should not even call yourself a marketer if you've not read Ogilvy on Advertising. And he said that if you are going to get into the advertising business or work into the advertising business, understand that it is a business that breeds anxiety. And if you cannot handle continual creativity and chaos, you're not cut out for advertising. And so when you hire people, they better be able to operate in that system. So the thing, like you're saying, having failures, there's so many ideas, there's so many things, and it's swimming through complexity.
I've had maybe 3 or 4 huge successes, and here's how I found them, which you might find interesting. I would be going along in a certain path, a path that I thought was the path that I was to go on. For example, we were selling electronic gadgets. And then something comes up, and you see an opportunity, and you go 90 degrees from where you thought you were going, and that's where the gold mine is. And that happened with me, Blue Blocker. I'm going along selling electronic gadgets, and all of a sudden I try this sunglass product, and it works like crazy. And I just dropped everything else and went for that. But there are a lot of, and I have a lot of other examples like that. The second thing I wanted to point out is the power of belief. If you believe you're going to be a success, you will be. It's just as simple as that. If you believe you're going to be a failure, right, David? He's smiling and nodding.
That's the first part.
Oh, the first part. If you believe you're going to be a success, you will be. I guarantee you. So belief is a really important factor too. And this is all basic psychology, of course. But again, my experience, I've been on both sides of the table, and I know what happens. So.
You know, Dan Sullivan says the most important thing to develop as a skill as an entrepreneur is confidence. Because if you're saying when you step out of something when it's a failure is when your confidence, your belief in it's completely sapped, and it's draining, and it's But again, it could be there's always strategic byproducts of everything you do, and the shit that I've learned the most from are all failures. I never would have accomplished anything if I had areas that were not working. It's every progress I've made, and I think it would apply to almost everyone here, is your success came out of an area of your life that wasn't working, and you figured out how to transform what wasn't working into something that worked.
Yeah. I also think, we get real isolated and incestuous in evaluating when it's a failure, when it's a success, and especially when it comes to like when do you cut bait. We often look at our own product and decide, okay, why is it not operating? What am I doing wrong or whatever? But it's the people who aren't buying it that are the best reviewers of why you're a failure with a certain project or not. And so, especially if you keep like a prospect list and a buyer list, going back to that prospect list and asking them why they didn't buy, they'll tell you why it's not selling as much as you want. I mean, they're the ones that you want to buy it anyway. But too often we just go to our peers, or we sit down and scratch our head and stare at the whiteboard and try and figure out why. I mean, we marketed a product for 5 years with utter failure, trying to figure out what was wrong with it. We tried every combination we could until we went back to our prospect list and asked them why they weren't buying, and they told us what the information was that they really wanted. It was completely different than what we were been marketing with them for 5 years on a certain product. When we changed that, now it is our biggest revenue generator for our entire company.
That reminds me of the story Carlos. Maybe Carlos can tell it. Remember we used to sell something and then you did an ask campaign? And
Yeah.
you figured out like it was zip code? Or
Yeah,
something?
my first campaign, I was a cable installer before I got into internet marketing. I was selling cable boxes over the internet. I thought people were worried that they were illegal. And then I did an exit survey, and I said, hey, wait, before you go, what's the biggest reason you didn't buy this cable box? And the number one reason was, will it work in my area? So I did it to a squeeze page that said, see if it works in your area, put in your zip code, email address.
Wow.
Next page, congratulations, it works in your area. I hit 2% conversion rate, and we got it to do like $2 million a month.
You got the pot one of those.
With that one
But the key is before it wasn't converting that
exactly,
well.
before it wasn't converting.
So he did an ask campaign on an exit pop and just found out the reason they weren't buying, implemented it into the program, and then he had a home run. So what you're saying, Jeff, is exactly true.
Yeah.
To pull your customers or non-customers or your leads, I should say.
Yeah, Gary Halbert would always say, I mean, he was serious about this too. He would say that if you want to make money as a marketer, ride the bus, the public bus, once a month. He's like, especially if you start making a lot of money, because you quit living like your customers. You start staying at really nice hotels, you drive expensive cars, you eat out at restaurants all the time. It's like the average buyer of your stuff does not live like that. And you become more and more disconnected with humans as you reach a certain level of financial success. And he's like, just ride the bus. And if you're riding the bus, watch and observe.
That happened at Dean,
Well,
right?
Joe, one of the things that I used to do when we would offer a product is I'd man the phones and I'd take the orders and I'd hear the questions that people ask. And so if you get involved with your customer, Joe's absolutely right, you get involved with your customer, you get involved with the environment, you'll learn a lot of things. I know I did handling those phone calls.
If I can add to that too, because Joe, I think this came from your ad writer's copywriting book. I might be giving you credit that you're not taking it. I'll give it a shot. But was, you know, when we look at our research, when we look at who our target demographic is and what information we're looking for, oftentimes we'll go to like the magazines within our niche. But if you look at like the more general magazines, that your target demographic, like if you know who your best customers are by gender and by age, you know, you might find that reading like Women's Day magazine instead of like a women's fitness magazine is a better magazine to learn their language, the things that are important to them on a daily basis, rather than like the women's fitness magazine where you typically go to. And that really gets you like into the head of somebody that, you know, I can't identify with, you know, a 45-year-old mom who's like trying to bake cakes and stuff. But that's the rest of their day outside of like fitness. And that's how you learn their language, how they think, how they act, what they say, and it helps you with their copywriting. Well, I think you're right.
I don't remember.
Anybody else?
Thank you, though.